Hello, and thank you for listening to Rivers of the Mind. My name is Timmy Vilgiate, the writer and producer of Rivers of the Mind. Hello, and thank you for listening to Rivers of the Mind. My name is Timothy Vilgiate, the writer and producer of Rivers of the Mind, a deep state cyborg UCCS radio production. Before we begin, I'd like to give a specific set of instructions for listening to this show. First, do not look up. Do not look to your right, okay? It's really, really simple. Just, okay? You can do this, buddy. I believe in you. Also, this show is not supposed to make you do drugs, so don't. Elements of this series may be disturbing for some listeners. Rivers of the Mind features Timothy Vilgiate, me, as John, and C.J. Hackett as Ryan and the Fisherman. Now, with all that said, here is Season 2, Episode 5 of Rivers of the Mind, entitled The Stairway. Well, aren't you going to come in? Come on. You realize I'm doing this on a constant loop, and you didn't figure out I already know you're here? Jeez. He must have really done a number on this version of you, huh?
I emerged from behind the car. Haphazardly, he waved.
Hey.
Hey.
How's it going?
I stared forward with a marked deadness in my eyes, hoping that my silence was enough of an answer. He stared back at me, equally dead. He knew the feeling, he seemed to tell me with a sympathetic smirk. A smirk, though, because he was much, much older than me, and had endured much worse. Walking towards him with suspicion, I stumbled slightly up onto the curb. Ryan's eyes rapidly scanned back and forth, uncertain if another version of him from a rival timeline was after him. Or perhaps he'd already been killed several times before I could reach the house, and we were one of the few timelines that had survived. He was, after all, the oldest in a long line of others, all with competing objectives. His objective, after all of these years, had dwindled down to just one. To find a reality where he could be killed. Completely killed. He stared me in the eyes, very seriously, waiting to feel the strong pull of gravity inwards, hoping that it would suck him down and obliterate him. But it didn't come through. He rolled his eyes and turned to enter the house. Inside, I saw a dimly lit room with a yellow rug and an orange couch with a reddish quilt pattern, inhabited by a lonely brown-haired, shaggy dog, whose eyes leered up at the stairway with knowing worry.
This timeline has way better Coors Light than yours. You should try it.
Well, I didn't feel like drinking, and quite honestly, I didn't understand how he was drinking, you know? Like, did he have hands? What would it mean to drink? If I drank his 7-dimensional beer, would that have lasting effects on my health? He handed me one anyway. I stared at it, not comprehending. Ryan massaged the back of his neck, and he took a long sip of his beer. Ryan spread his arm over the side of the couch and rested his legs, angling so that I was backed somewhat into a corner. The two of us looked into the TV, seeing nothing but a blank screen. Deciding to let myself imagine that we were now just, I guess, two bros hanging out, drinking beer, I opened the can and I took a slow drink. None of the food I'd eaten for the last eternity had had any taste whatsoever, and this had a taste, so I sucked it down rapidly,
Yeah, I remember my first time figuring that out. I just about drank every beer in this stupid house. Doesn't really have too much of an effect since you're basically just pouring it onto the couch right now. Every time the timeline resets, the beers respawn, and I've probably drank well, I don't know. The house is probably flooded. I mean, not just with alcohol. Blood, probably too.
I glared up at him, warily. I had thousands of questions, but no way to put them to words. Ryan had anticipated this.
We just watch here. We're fixed in space, but our minds aren't bound by time. That clock up there has ticked once. I saw it tick. Just about pissed myself.
How did this happen to you?
I was being a dumbass. You ever heard of Datura? Jimson weed? My friend told me it could get you high, so I tried it out in our backyard. And while I was out there, I saw this big flash of light. I started freaking out. I thought I was being followed by all these people, and everything seemed like it was moving slower, so I went upstairs, and that's when it really hit. The pain. I realized that it took too much, so I started dying. I felt my soul start leaving my body. My life flashed before my eyes, and then, bloop, I come out of my body, and I just float away. I went back in time, through years and years of history until I was watching dinosaurs crawl backwards into salamanders, crawling backwards into plankton, crawling back into alien terraforming pods. Just kidding about that last one. Not in this timeline, at least. That's why the Coors Light here is so good.
How many of you are there now? He looked off at the clock, and his eyes glassed over with terror. Counting and counting, he eventually could only collapse into hysteric laughter. After all, there were new people every moment. There was no end to them. Pieces of his mind might brush up against each other as they dissolved across time, but they never knew one another completely. So, I guess, in short, it was a stupid question.
As many as there are of you now. Maybe more. Your friend Megan, the cute one from the Walmart, she's fighting me right now. Is she single now, by the way? Don't give me that look. I mean, she's cute, right? I mean, obviously, I'm not gonna, make a move on her. Whatever. She's fighting me, and it's paralyzing me. Well, it's paralyzing part of me. One of me. Douchebag me. A.k.a. the Fisherman, which may or may not be the name of his emo band. Who knows? He's like 3 trillion years old or something like that. Typical young asshole. Popped up in this universe a little bit ago, and now he's getting dangerous. You're the only thing that can get him out of his mind and into other minds. That's why he found you. Megan's throwing a bit of a wrench in that.
His face went blank, staying still for a few seconds. He looked back and forth, trying to remember the last thing he said.
That's why he found you. Megan's throwing a bit of a wrench in that. A wrench? Oh, yeah. Wrench.
What is she doing?
There's not enough time to explain. I mean, there is.
He became gravely serious as he repeated himself, almost horrified at his own words.
There's plenty of time. There's literally nothing but time. But I mean, we're cutting it close to the order I have to do this in. I need to get you out.
How? He sipped the last of his imaginary beer, which at this point had become completely invisible, and he tilted the unseen can towards the stairway.
Stand up.
Not quite understanding, but not wanting to disobey. I stood and I consciously raised the beer to my lips. As its cold, non-existent aluminum touched my mouth, I felt the alcohol within come to life and transmute into white-hot energy between my teeth, running in between my cells and washing over the cracks in my eyes with a shimmering vibration. What looked like graph paper, endless blue grid lines over a blank white page, rolled out like fresh carpet over every surface in the home except for myself and the stairway, which now stretched miles into the sky. A single door repeated on the stairway every 10 or 20 feet.
I didn't want to let you in on this until I'd explained a little bit. I had to get you here first.
My heart started pounding, but what could I do? I gave in with resignation to the inevitability. Tiny gray dots circled around my feet, leaving faint, ever-disappearing pinpricks of light gray. They danced away from me, tracing paths all across the floor that looked like veins of silver being passed over by a flashlight. Sliding past the edge of the stairway, they seemed to go through the monotonous graph paper wall, and right in front of my eyes the silver dots sketched out another copy of myself, and then the stairway. Working like tiny graphite ants, they duplicated the scene over and over again until I couldn't see the end of it. I looked back and realized that I was only one of thousands of sketches drawn onto a graph paper reality that bled into itself and encompassed me from every side. A world with no definite shape, only blank blue lines of indeterminate distance over a blank white expanse. A voice pressed in against every side of every one of my psyches.
Chill. I know it seems like you're hallucinating and shit, but this is like the first time you haven't been hallucinating in a long-ass time. Except those stairs. Those are total bullshit. But I mean, the metaphor is helpful, so I don't know. Time travel's hard to understand, and I like visual aids. So just bear with me, I guess. Here's what you gotta do. Damn it. Sorry, my memory's blanking again. Gotta retrace my steps. Monarch butterfly, Atlantis sinks, Hitler lost World War II. Okay, that's right. Okay, I remember. You gotta go up those stairs, go into the third door on the left. Do not look to the right, and do not look up the stairs. That would be really bad. Don't look up. Just look at your feet and count to 33. 11 steps to each door. I really am not good with counting, so that's pretty much up to you. Like, just count. 1, 2, 3. 33 steps. Do not look up. Do not look to the right. Third door. The third door on the left. Okay?
I tried to walk. Instead of moving, I seemed to draw the stairs closer to me like I'd zoomed in with a camera. My muscles croaked with an inexplicable agony, shot with pain and exhausted like I'd run an entire mile. I moved closer to the stairs, so that the rail was almost close enough to touch. I wanted to look up, to see what lay at the end of the infinite stairway, to see if it was a trap, but I didn't. Nervously, I moved closer to the stairs and felt the cold wooden railing touch my hand. The nerves in my body seemed to connect with it.
A feeling like
electricity
pulsing through the seams between my flesh and my bone. The stairway shivered, and the world almost magically reverted to the living room, where Ryan still sat cross-legged on the couch, finishing a beer that did not exist in the periphery of my vision. But before I could look at him, I heard the same voice in my head as before.
Do not look to the right.
My heart filled with dread, and I looked down at my feet, taking the first steps up the stairway. 1, 2, 3. I winced, a sharp pain shooting through my legs. Only 30 more steps like this to go, I guess. 4. 5. 6. Suddenly, I caught a glimpse of something. My heart filled with an ecstasy. A memory, a real memory, pure and untouched, like new. Like a long-lost photograph that dangled around my mind and teased me. I reached into it. I tried to hold on to it and to cherish it. 7. 8. 9. I couldn't remember it. I couldn't bring it back. I couldn't even remember what I'd forgotten. 10. 11.
You don't really trust him, do you, John?
A light shone from underneath the door to the left. I looked towards it.
Don't you see what he's trying to do?
It asked, almost grinning with amusement. Of course I didn't trust him.
He wants you to keep looking down. He doesn't want you to see what's at the top of the stairs.
My eyes twitched. Yeah, well, interesting. You know what? You can shut the fuck up. Okay? Did you hear me? Yeah. Shut the fuck up. 12. 13. 14. I could feel something driving its way down my backbone, like the presence of a steel wedge piercing through the center of my body. Something that wasn't quite numb, but somehow without pain all the same. An anti-numbness, like the presence of feeling. 15. 16. 17. 18. 19. An energy tried to lurch its way out of my body. My skin felt like it could burst. 20. 21. The world seemed impossibly bright. I'd forgotten all that had happened to me before. I almost felt like I was falling backwards. But I didn't know how I could be. I was standing still on the stairs. A number was in my head, emblazoned and almost branded into my mind. The next number I had to count. I knew what it was. 22. An avalanche of gravity peeled itself off of me, and I sank down to the ground. My body felt light. My skin tore away and burst with fiery flares and arches that soared over my newly exposed star-like flesh. I was rising and rising. Suddenly, rather than shrinking, I convinced myself I was growing to incredible size. I didn't remember who I was, but I didn't need to remember. I'd been counting, but I didn't understand why. I was a smoldering piece of fire at the base of an immense door, alone on an endless, flat, wooden plain underneath the white sky crisscrossed with blue lines. Do I keep walking? Do I keep counting? Ahead of me, I could see something. Ahead of me rose a high wall, striped red and yellow and brown, and tinged with spots of the deepest black I could comprehend. I leaned back, my head with my eyes shut, and rose my hands, and sung in exaltation to myself, "Oh, self, red mass of star-like energy at the base of the wooden stair. Myself, I have always been, I always will be. I am the mass of star-like flesh." The earth shook. I became infinite light. Tiny white squares with blue edges began falling down from the sky, covered in flames. I looked up. A fire was spreading across the white, seamless sky, carving open what looked like an ever-expanding set of paired lips that concealed an endless and eternal black. Thousands of white flowers streaked with barely perceptible blue grids hung in the sky like dancing bells descending upon me. I stared upwards at them, transfixed by their gentle and seductive forms. The sky above engulfed my senses. My own light felt incredibly dim as I faced the infinite and colossal nothingness of something even more eternal than myself. A sheet of graph paper slid from over the edges of the night sky, taking up the whole horizon for uncountable miles with a hissing sound that seemed to blanket the entire universe.
Run!
I didn't know how. I looked back at my feet. They were hardly feet at all anymore. They looked like faded pencil marks. Oh my god. It had made, and now it had begun to erase me. I ran and I ran towards the distant wall in front of me. The white flowers melted and reshaped themselves into one great rectangle high above our heads, while the burnt night sky crumpled itself into a ball some distance to the side. The ruined sky, which I knew somehow was friendly, folded inwards and rotated like a fresh-formed planet, contorting into a fractal vortex, a never-ending, swirling snail shell surrounded by a growing disk. Paper rippled away from this perplexing, anti-geometric figure in crisscrossing waves, shaped like diamonds, to form a saw blade that tore against the edges of the invading sky. The invaders, meanwhile, broke up their formation and regrouped to the side, splitting once again into colossal white flowers that lined their mouths up against each other and swallowed the other up, with an effect that looked like a finger passing underneath a mirror. The reflections then would reappear about half a mile away from each other and hurtle back together to repeat this process of collision, dissolution, and remanifestation. As this pattern repeated and repeated in front of my helpless eyes, the flowers arranged themselves into two immense rectangles that hovered around each other in perfectly executed, yet seemingly impossible orbits. The diamond saw teeth at the edge of the friendly sky extended into the invading sky, driving it back as the two colossal rectangles swung towards the massive saw blades like hammers. This took place over what seemed like eons, like a movie taking place outside of my own sun-like sky. Eventually, a great hand pulled me and removed me from the scene entirely, so that I watched myself watch the sky. And then another great hand took me so that I could watch myself see the two immense rectangles coalesce into strips and coil around each other like two pythons trying to swallow themselves. And then I watched myself watch a pyramid rotating and peeling off of itself to attack the rectangles with endless rows of neat white squares, casting brilliant, parasol-shaped circles across the sky like a confusion of monochromatic umbrellas. The two skies grew larger and larger until they collided. I watched myself, watching myself stare at a flickering graph paper chaos. I walked away from him, the one who was watching myself, towards another stairway, much like the one I'd just left, which waited for me at the far side of a blank void. I opened my eyes. Oh fuck, dude. This party got out of hand. Shook my head. My stomach trembled. What was I seeing? I didn't know this house, but I heard music. I smelled beer. I heard some food. I did hear some food. Wait. Fuck, man. Jesus, I must be really high right now. I opened my eyes again. Were they closed? No. Was I tripping? I was lying on the stairs, and I was looking down. Fuck, dude. This was a crazy party. I shook my stomach and my head trembled. I opened my eyes. My head shook. My trembled stomach became. I opened my eyes. I opened my eyes. I opened my eyes. I opened my eyes. All at once, I remembered I was a prisoner. The lights from the party became gray. The door at the base of the stairs rattled with furious wind and pounding rain. The river had started to rise up into the city and cover the floor. I remembered what I had to do. I had to keep going. 23. I looked down at my feet. Or I looked where I knew that my feet should be. With no light at all, I couldn't quite see myself very clearly. As I moved into an immense shadow, my atoms lost their form. My essence lost its being. There was no more sight, no more to be seen. I remembered what I had to do. 24. 25. 26. 27. 28. 29. 30. 31. 32. 33. The door. The stairway and the house peeled back, and I saw the door. Alone in the center of a 1,000-pointed star, printed like never-ending graph paper that flowed out of itself and only outward, so wide that I could not see the end of its points. I could only know that they were there, know that they flowed towards an unseen and distant four-dimensional pyramid of indeterminate size. The deep inevitability of these unseen formations was instinctive and unquestionable. From here, everything looked as though I sat in the base of a valley. Though tempted to look up, to look away from myself, from this body that I knew to be mine, this self that I knew to be imperfect, I focused my attention away from the unknowable shape and curvature of that which was, and instead I focused everything, all of my senses on the door. The nice door. The familiar door. The old door. The door that, like a grandparent, seems nice and familiar and old. The door with streak marks from old rainstorms that have weathered bleach stains into its solid wood. The door with keyholes rusted and hinges peeling off of their arches. The door that smells of sanitized air and wet cement. Door behind which hides a trinity of warring skies. I touched the handle, and the nerves in some distant, massive form lined up with my own. All across the endless, spherical body, the 1,000-pointed star that stretched so far around the horizon that it swallowed the horizon whole, I saw that I existed only as one tiny cell of something massive. I was one of 9,999,999 points in a network that existed here at this door at all times, all universes, all existences. I could see myself there at the door, my hand around the doorknob, turning it slowly with my wrist, and then light.
Your feet.